Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel and happy to see you all again. In my YouTube channel, you all watched many videos, which is many vlogs and explained videos. I hope that you all enjoyed them all. And today itself, I'm going to do a new try. Yes, I'm going to read a book, which is a book of The Prince and the Pauper, and the author name is Mark Twain. You can see the book. Yeah, let's get into the story. The Prince and the Pauper, Mark Twain. Chapter 1. Two Worlds. Two babies were born on the same day in London, sometime in the 1500s. Both were boys but belonged to different worlds. The first was named Tom Candy, and he was born to one of the poorest families in England. Tom's family wore torn and tattered clothes and lived together in a single room in a London slum. To this family, the arrival of a child was just another unwanted mouth that had to be fed. In sharp contrast, the second child, called Edward Tudor, was born in the palace. His birth was greeted with great joy, but by his family as well as the entire country. This was because Edward was the prince, and everyone from lords and peasants to rich and poor celebrated birth. The street where Tom Candy resided was noisy and was called Offal Court. It was crowded and dirty. Tom's family lived on the third floor of a tumble down house. His mother and his 15-year-old twin sisters, Bet and Nan, were gentle and kind. But Tom's father, John Candy, and his grandmother, Gammer Candy, were wicked and mean minded. Tom's father was a thief, and both he and his mother were prone to drinking, cursing, and fighting with everyone whenever they didn't have much to do. Where is the money from today's begging? John Candy would scream. His family and his wife would meekly hand over whatever she had managed to bring back, so would her daughters. What about you, you good for nothing fellow? John Candy would then ask his son. What you have brought back? Nothing again? He would exclaim and then beat up his son. This was their daily routine. After that, Tom's grandmother would shout at him, I am ashamed to call you useless fellow like you, my grandson. Gammer Candy would declare and smack Tom. Tom would lie on his bed, which was made of a pile of dirty straw on a torn blanket, as he cried of pain and hunger. Then he would hear his mother whisper his name and hand him her food. No, ma, he would exclaim. I won't have your food as you didn't have your super either. What's that? A shout would emerge as John Candy would stride into the room. You are the one who's been spoiling the useless brat, haven't you? He would say and then beat up his wife as a terrified Tom watched. It serves her right, Gammer Candy would encourage her son. Strangely, despite all the trouble that surrounded him, Tom was not sad. This kind of life appeared normal to him, as everyone he knew in his neighborhood was treated the same way. So it did not appear strange to him that both he and his mother were being beaten up every day by their father. Chapter 2. Tom's Special Friend. Tom had a special friend in Father Andrew. The poor priest resided in the same dilapidated house as Tom and secretly taught all the neighborhood children. Father Andrew taught them how to read and write, to differentiate between right and wrong. Tom was keen to learn more and soon started learning Latin too. Tom also learnt about princes and kings thanks to the stories Father Andrew told him, as well as by reading books. Tom was fascinated by the lives led by the royals. Is it true that they wear different clothes each day? He asked Father Andrew in surprise. Yes, Tom, Father Andrew replied. Not only that, but their clothes are made of fine, rich fabric and are always clean. My rags are cleaner than before, and so am I, Father, Tom stated proudly. I have seen the change, and I must admit it is a good one. Father Andrew admitted. But I am wondering how you sourced so much water to wash them. That's simple, Father. I go to the Thomas River every day after I have played in the mud with my friends and I splash about till I'm clean as a whistle. Tom replied proudly. But please tell me how a king orders his counsel, Father. Tom pleaded eagerly as his eyes shone with excitement. Don't you get tired of these stories, my boy? Father Andrew laughed. But I must confess that you are an expert now on how the royals conduct themselves. Father Andrew was right as Tom's fascination with royalty and almost grown to an obsession. His friends were surprised when he began to speak and behave like a king, but he displayed such signs of maturity and intelligence, and his decisions were so wise that even grown ups approached Tom for advice sometimes and went away praising the boy. Soon, Tom had formed a make believe court with his friends and he headed the court. He divided his friends into the royal guards, the council of ministers, lords, and ladies in waiting, and issued royal commands to them. He presided over meetings of the royal council and gave orders to the chiefs of the army and the navy. But Tom was not satisfied with these imaginary games. What he really longed for was to meet a real prince. This feeling lingered in his mind all the time. When he was begging for food, as he received his daily beatings, at play with his friends and even his dreams. The setting of his dreams always revolved around a magnificent court, where lords and ladies dressed at their dazzling best whispered into his ears. He breathed in perfumed air and listened to music that was heavenly. Then Tom would wake up suddenly to the disgusting things that surrounded him and he would start crying. Chapter 3. The Prince Meets the Pauper. One day, Tom woke up from sleep and left the house, hungry as usual. He was so lost in the dreams he had the night before that he lost his way. Soon he found himself before a huge, impressive building decorated with gold bars and big stone lions. He had a gateway of stone. This can only be the king's palace, Tom exclaimed happily. Maybe now I shall see a real prince. Tom approached the golden bars and noticed a boy standing inside. He was richly dressed in clothes of silk and satin dashed with shiny jewels, and was sun tanned. Many well dressed servants stood in attendance beside him. Tom's eye widened in wonder and happiness, and he went closer for a better glimpse of the prince. But suddenly he found his shoulders grabbed as he was flung away into the crowd behind. That all teach you some manners, you little ruffian, the soldier who had thrown Tom away shouted. The crowd laughed cruelly, but the prince, who had observed the entire incident, came running outside. How dare you behave in such a manner? The prince scolded the guard. Not even the lowest of my father's subjects deserve to be treated in such a manner. Let him inside at once, he ordered. Then Edward Tudor walked over to Tom, took his hand, and led him inside the palace personally. Tom gaped in amazement as the prince led him to his personal room that he called his cabinet. The room was richly furnished, and the prince ordered his servants to fetch Tom some food. Tom had never seen such delicious before, and the prince ordered his servants to leave so Tom could eat freely. What is your name? Where do you live? The curious prince asked Tom. Then he asked about the Candy family. I live with my parents, twin sisters, and my grandmother, Tom replied, adding that he didn't like his grandmother. Isn't that nice to you? The prince asked. No, she is an evil person who isn't nice to anyone, Tom replied. Does she treat you badly? Well, she doesn't when she is asleep or drink, Tom confessed. But once she is sober, she covers lost ground with some solid beatings. How dare she? The prince exclaimed angrily. Why, I will order her to be sent to the Tower of London prison. But that's only for noble or important prisoners, Your Highness, Tom interrupted. Oh yes, that escaped my mind, the prince stated. I'll think of some other way to punish her. But tell me, how does your father treat you? Just as my grandmother, Tom replied. I think all fathers are the same, the prince said. My father has a bad temper too, and although he doesn't beat me, he calls me every now and then. But how is your mother? She's a very kind person, and so are my sisters. Tom replied. How old are your sisters? 15. My sister Lady Elizabeth is 14. The prince offered. My cousin Lady Jane Grey is the same age as me. But tell me something, Tom. Do your sister forbid your servants to smile as well, saying that smiling is a sin? Your Highness, do you really think my sisters have servants? Tom asked. Yes, of course, the prince replied. Who would help them undress at night and help them put on their clothes in the morning otherwise? Nobody helps them, Tom replied. How can they undress at night and sleep without any clothes like animals? Tom asked. Why should they do that? Surely they don't have just one dress apiece. The prince asked in surprise. Yes, they do, Your Majesty, Tom replied. Why should they need more than one dress apiece anyway? They have one body apiece after all. Prince Edward laughed loudly and then apologized. I promise you that your sisters shall have enough nice clothes to wear soon, he promised Tom. Chapter 4. They switch. Having not experienced this kind of life before, Prince Edward was more and more curious about the life led by Tom Candy. How do you spend your time at Waffle Court? The prince asked. Well, there is a traveling puppet show, Tom replied. One can also watch plays and entertainers with monkeys. What kind of plays? Edward asked excitedly. There is a lot of shouting, fighting, and killing in these plays, but they are good fun and it costs only a farthing to watch them. Tom replied and added sadly. But a farthing is difficult to get? Go on, the prince urged. Tell me more. What do you do with your friends? When run races and have stick fights sometimes, Tom replied. We go swimming in the canals in the summer and we have water fights in the river or we splash about and have lots of fun. Oh, how I would love to do all that, the prince exclaimed. If only I could do all these things just once in my life, but go now, don't stop. We bury each other in the sand at the edge of the river and create mud peas. It's the best fun you can in the whole world, Tom exclaimed. Stop, Edward said sadly. If only I could take your place and play around in the mud without any shoes and without anyone to scold me. Why I could even give up my crown for that? I wish I could be dressed like you. Just once and Tom hesitated and spoke no further. You do? The prince exclaimed. Take off your clothes and put on mine them. We all exchange clothes just for a little while and switch back before anyone notices. In the space of just a few minutes, Edward, Prince of Wales, was dressed in rags and the pauper, Tom Candy, was dressed in royal robes. The two boys were stunned when they stood side by side and stared at their reflections in a full length mirror. It did not appear that the change had taken place at all. Isn't this amazing? The prince exclaimed. We have the same build, hair, eyes, and voice. No one can tell us apart by looking at us. Tom nodded as he was too astonished to speak. Now that I am dressed in your clothes, I can feel your pain when my soldier pushed you, Edward said. Is that a bruise on your head? It's nothing, Your Majesty. Tom replied, It was a cruel act. I'm going to give that soldier the scolding of his life. You stay in this room and don't move till I return, the prince ordered. Edward quickly put away a large, round gold disc that had been lying on the table and headed outside. Open the gates, he ordered after reaching the exit. The soldier who had bruised Tom opened the gates and as an angry Edward stepped out, he smacked the boy on the ear so hard that Edward went spiraling and fell on the road outside. The crowd gathered outside burst out laughing. That was for getting me into trouble with His Highness, the soldier shouted. You shall hang for this, Edward shouted angrily at the soldier. How dare you? I am the Prince of Wales. I beg your pardon, Your Majesty. The soldier replied mockingly, I salute you, your highness. Now get out, you crazy beggar, he shouted. The crowd had gathered around the prince now, making fun of him and pushing him further away from the palace as they hooted, laughed, and chanted. Make way for the prince, make way for his royal highness. Chapter 5. The prince amidst paupers. No one in the crowd believed the prince when he told them that he was the Prince of Wales. Instead, they laughed and jeered at him as they followed him. They treated his royal commands as a joke, and Edward didn't know what to do. The crowd was finally tired of this game and they abandoned the prince who roamed through the streets of London alone. Edward was sad, shocked, and hopelessly lost. Having never stepped out of the palace gates unscathed, but suddenly Edward saw a glimmer of hope. He had finally recognized a building in the Christchurch hospital. He was certain that he would receive help here as it was an institution set up by his own father for poor and homeless boys abandoned by their parents. The prince spotted a group of boys playing ball and leapfrog and went up to them. The boys stopped running and jumping around to stare at Edward. My good lads, will you be kind enough to inform your master that the Prince of Wales has arrived? Edward addressed the boy. You beggar, a tall boy laughed. Are you the prince's messenger now? He sneered. Edward's hand automatically reached for his hip, but there was no sword there. Ha, look at that, another boy mocked. The pauper thought he possessed a sword just like the prince. The other boys laughed loudly at Edward, which made him angrier. Why, I am the prince, he exclaimed angrily. It's not right on your part to treat me in this fashion. When you are living here due to the kindness of my father, why, I am the prince, he exclaimed angrily. It's not right on your part to treat me in this fashion when you are living here due to the kindness of my father. All the boys burst out laughing and the tall boy pretended to be angry with his friends. How dare you laugh, you lowly swine? He winked and yelled. Aren't you ashamed of such action after living off his father? Get down on your knees right now and bow to his royal rakship. The boy sarcastically bowed before the prince. How dare you? The prince exclaimed and kicked the boy nearest him. Now he is crossed the limit, a boy said angrily. Let's drag him to the pond, another suggested. Call the dogs as well, a third offered. For the first time in England's glorious history, the royal heir to the throne was beaten up by common boys and set upon by dogs. Before the day ended, Edward found himself in the crowded heart of the city, injured, bleeding, dirty, and dead tired. I must reach Woeful Court before I lose consciousness, Edward thought. Tom Candy's family will realize I'm not their son and take me back to the palace. I must ensure a proper education for these boys at Christ's Hospital when I'm king. They need that more than the food, shelter, and clothes they already have. Proper education is needed to soften their hearts and make them better human beings. The prince found himself in a noisy alley as it rained heavily when someone grabbed him by the collar. Edward turned around to face a drunken ruffian. What are you doing out so late and where are those farthing that you have earned today, you brat? The ruffian yelled. I beg your pardon, the prince replied. What on earth are you talking about? Don't try your tricks with me, lad, the man warned. I will break all the bones on your body or else my name is not John Candy. You are John Candy? The prince exclaimed. That's wonderful. You are his father. Thank God. I have finally found you. His father, Candy exclaimed. What on earth are you jabbering about? You fool. I am your father and when you receive my blows you shall realize. Please, kind Sir Edward interrupted him. I shall explain everything later. I am exhausted as well as wounded. Please take me to my father, the king, and he shall reward you handsomely for your troubles. You shall be richer than your wildest dreams, and you won't have to beg for a living anymore. You have finally gone mad, John Candy says Edward roughly. But mad or not, it doesn't matter. Your father and your gamer candy have just the right cure for your madness. We shall hit your brains as well as your bones so hard that you shall be cured instantly. Candy exclaimed and dragged Edward away, who struggled to break free from his grasp.